Lipton's tea with peach. Love it. I wanted to say happy Thanksgiving. Wishing everyone, especially the BOB, a warm and happy Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving morning right now, and I haven't done a video in a while, and one or two guys in the BOB have asked me to do more sit-down videos, so that's what this is. I'll tell a little story here in a minute about my brother Jaybird and I on Thanksgiving Day about 30 years ago that you might enjoy. As far as my Thanksgiving, I cooked a 5-pound turkey breast myself 2 days ago, and this morning I stripped all the meat off the carcass and put it in Ziploc bags. Some of it I froze, and the rest I left in the refrigerator so I can make turkey sandwiches. So that's my own personal preparation. But as far as hanging out with family and friends today, I'll be going over to my son's house. A lot of you remember seeing him in videos in the past. And my daughter as well will be there. And my son's only a few miles away from where I sit right now, so it's very convenient for me. And he's got a really beautiful place over there. It's huge with giant ceilings, high ceilings, old antique barn wood floors. It's just a beautiful place. So we're going to be over there and some other family members, and we're just going to have a great time meeting for dinner this afternoon. Then my younger sister has rented a beach condo right here in my town. I don't know what got into her to do that. She lives about 30 miles north of me. Well, she came down here and rented a condo for the holiday and the weekend. And she's having her side of the family there for Thanksgiving today. And for all of her brothers and sisters, which includes me, and Jaybird and my older sister and all of our children and all of our families, she's invited us for Thanksgiving dessert at 6-ish. So I have a two-pronged day, as most families do, especially young people today. They all have multiple dinners to attend. They attend dinner on their family side and then dinner on their girlfriend or wife's family side. So, you know, most Americans eat at least twice today. Isn't that funny? And for those of us that just stay in and have a big family dinner, a traditional dinner with our families, we'll eat all day long. But anyway, so that's what's up on my side. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the original Thanksgiving, which I think deserves a few minutes of discussion. And then I'm going to tell a story about my brother Jaybird and I from 30 years ago. Now, for anyone that doesn't know this, the very first Thanksgiving was not the idea of the Native Americans or the Pilgrims who were on the northeast coast. It wasn't their idea to have the first Thanksgiving. The first Thanksgiving was an institution of President George Washington. He instituted the very first Thanksgiving. And if you do a little digging on the internet, you'll find his letter to the nation introducing the first Thanksgiving. And there's nobody that can read his letter who can defend the idea that our founding fathers were not Christian. Because President George Washington mentioned God in such an eloquent manner many times in his letter about the first Thanksgiving, thanking the good Lord and Creator of all things for all bounty and all of our good things that we have in life. That's just to put it shortly. But he made a really nice letter, and everyone should read that. And understand, when you read that, you're learning about the founding of our country. And for the liberals who complain that Thanksgiving, now they're complaining that it only celebrates us coming over here and destroying Native Americans and displacing them. Well, that whole idea is full of bunk. Because what did the liberals expect? You know, when Adam was created, there was only one man on the entire earth, so he had all the space to himself. But then came Eve. So then all the space was, you know, for two people. And then came Cain, Abel, and their third son Seth, and they had other sons as well, and they had daughters as well. So the population began to grow. Right there from the Garden of Eden, it became necessary for people to spread out. I mean, come on, wake up. The liberal thing is mental illness is what we're facing, people. Mental illness. That they find everything to complain about and make it sound like white chauvinist pigs have destroyed America by killing all the Native Americans. I'm sorry, but the expansion of the population of the world was and is inevitable. It could not be stopped. As the population grew in Europe, people began to spread to other continents. That was inevitable. It couldn't be stopped. And sadly, you know, when the white settlers came to America, it started to impinge on the land that the natives had enjoyed for all of history and all of prehistory. It's sad, I agree. I've always had a heart for the Native Americans. It's sad how we ended up at war with each other. It's sad how, unknowns to the white settlers, they brought viruses and diseases that wiped out most of the native population. There's a lot of sad parts to it, but it was inevitable. It's not like it was a planned, you know, thing for white Europeans to come here and kill people. That's not what the plan was. It just happened that way, and it was inevitable. And the same is true today. Expansion and moving into uninhabited areas is inevitable. Right now in our country, the middle of the country, the great states of Montana, the Dakotas, all those great lands out there that are mostly uninhabited, you know, if our world is not destroyed in the next few hundred years, those areas will become more and more populated. It's inevitable, you know. So the first Thanksgiving was an institution of the first president of the United States, who thought it was time to have everyone get together in their individual families, and it was actually a day of prayer, is what he called it. To pray for all the goodness and thank the good Lord for everything he had given us as a country and as a people. And that's what it was about. And the food thing became the tradition, you know, tradition that we all started. That they all, since they were gathering together, they made a feast of it. Well, on that very first Thanksgiving that we all see taught in schools, and when we were kids, we were taught, that showed the pilgrims suffering because they were not used to surviving in the bitter environment, and they were sickly and weak and had no food, and the Native Americans came to the rescue and brought food and had a big feast. That's not the truth. That never happened. In fact, the pilgrims had plenty of food. The pilgrims were doing quite well, and in fact they were doing so well that that's how they ended up taking over the country. It was the Native Americans who were subsisting upon barely enough rations to survive their winters. They were very, you know, the environment back in those days, with no technology, no heat and all that, and more difficult raising your own food and getting food, storing food. The natives were who suffered in the cold months of the year. It's true that they eventually taught the white settlers how to plant corn, which they called maize, and so we learned how to plant corn. And they might have taught us about potatoes as well, but anyway, it's not true that the pilgrims were suffering and dying from lack. We were the ones that had the abundant food, and the pilgrims invited the natives to their feast because they had a good relationship with the natives. The natives, what was it, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe? If I mispronounced it, I apologize. They were kind people, and so they accepted the pilgrims, and the pilgrims wanted to invite them because the pilgrims knew how difficult their winters were. They didn't live in the heated shacks, you know, the cabins like these white settlers were living in. The Pilgrims had a better subsistence than the natives did, but they wanted to share their bounty, and I presume the natives brought food as well. But it wasn't the way it was taught in public schools. The Pilgrims were doing quite fine by themselves. So that was the first Thanksgiving, and it was instituted by President George Washington. It was not the idea of the Pilgrims or the natives. That peach flavor additive just gives it a little bite. Just makes it really good. Now I will tell you guys a story. This is for the BOB, and if I make the video public, it's for anybody that wants to watch. Just one of many Thanksgiving stories that I could tell. But back in the day, when my brother Jaybird and I were young, my mom had married a man from the Navy, and he was a good old, a man's man kind of a guy. He was born and raised in Danville, Pennsylvania, at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And we had gone up there after my mom married him, and we met his family. It was really cool. There were so many men in his family. Oh my God. They had so many men in their family. For generations, they had their own softball team, and known by their last name. And and all of them were very impressive. It's funny too. They all looked alike. But anyway, they were great people. And my stepdad really is the one that got my younger brother Jaybird and I introduced into hunting and fishing, because he was an avid hunter and fisherman. Where he was born and raised, it was for survival. I mean, they hunted and fished for food. So my stepdad got Jaybird and I started out with our first fishing rigs and stuff when we were little, and he took us hunting, and next thing you know, we were getting guns and going hunting and all that. So back in those days, about 30 years ago, I was in my late 20s or early 30s, and Jaybird was a few years younger than me. And at that time, our stepdad, he didn't hunt on Thanksgiving like he would have when he was a boy, because he was a professional chef in the United States Navy and worked his way up to Chief Petty Officer. And let me tell you, he was our dad during his last several years in the Navy. And we all got exposed to his galley, to when he was on ship or when he was on land at a Navy base. We would be in he called it the galley, the mess hall, but he always called it a galley. And let me tell you, the U.S. Navy eats good. Those guys had some good food. My stepdad was a gourmet cook, and him and his staff put out the best food every single day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Amazing quality of food. And I hope it's still that way today for the Navy and all of our military. But anyway, 30 years ago, because my stepdad was a professional chef, he really loved cooking the Thanksgiving dinner. So him and my mom would be home cooking dinner all day. And so the tradition was, Jaybird and I, we would go out and rabbit hunt on Thanksgiving mornings. And sometimes our brother-in-law Barney would join us. He was the really big hunter in the family. And a state champion shot with his shooting skills. Anyway, we used to go out and hunt, and sometimes Barney would go with us. But this one time, 30 years ago, I say 30, it was 30 plus or minus a few years. Jaybird and I were out just a few miles from where I sit right now, and we were rabbit hunting. And I don't think we got a rabbit that day. And it was cold and snowy, it was really bitter. And after rabbit hunting for a couple hours, we decided to go squirrel hunting instead, which we always did as an option. If we didn't get any rabbits, we'd go squirrel hunting, because we knew we could get squirrel. And so we went squirrel hunting. And, we found a place where there was a railroad track that went through the woods, and my brother Jaybird got on one side of the railroad track and went into that woods, and I went into the woods on the other side. It wasn't long before I heard Jay's gun popping off over there in his woods, pop, pop, couple minutes later, pop, pop, you know. So I knew he was getting squirrels. And on my side, I had so many squirrels that were coming around and looking at me, and you know, they were just drawn, they were curious about me there in the woods. And I had so many that I remembered the first time I raised my gun to shoot, which I had done many times. I looked down the barrel of my gun and saw that squirrel looking back at me. And I don't know what it was about that day. It was just an odd day for me, because I had hunted, I can't even tell you. I mean, I would hunt from dawn till dusk, day after day after day. I was an avid hunter when hunting season was on. You know, squirrel, rabbit, deer, ducks. I hunted everything, but mainly squirrel and deer was what I liked to go for. And I spent a lot of time in the woods. In fact, when I was in college back in the day, I went to school in the wintertime with my hunting clothes on, with a hunting knife on my hip. That's the level of hunting I was doing. Because as soon as my classes were out, I was out the door and straight into the woods until dark. Well, I got so many hunting stories I could tell you. Some of them are so funny. But anyway, this one day, Jay and I are there. We're both squirrel hunting on Thanksgiving Day. And I just couldn't pull the trigger when I looked down at the squirrel this one time. And I didn't know it was going to lead to something significant at the time, but I raised my gun, and here's a 12-gauge shotgun, the very first shotgun I ever had. My mom bought it for me when I was 12 years old. It's a 12-gauge single-shot Stevens. I'm not going to open it all the way because it's loaded. You can see the shell right there. But it's an antique single-shot 12-gauge. That was an antique when my mom bought it for me. It was already used. It was at a local gun shop right here in town where I live now, and the man had redone it, had refinished it. And what my mom had done was she gave my next door neighbor I think she gave him $25 because he was an avid hunter, and she asked him if he would take me to the gun shop and see if he could find me a gun for that much money for my 12th birthday. Well, this gun was in a rack of lower cost guns, but I believe it was listed for more than $25. But I remember my neighbor looked it over, and then he handed it to me and let me look it over. And when he got to the counter, he dickered with the man, and believe it or not, I got this gun for my 12th birthday. 12-gauge Stevens, single shot, and I got this gun for $20. Great story. And the other $5, we bought a box of shells and some other things that I could have to go with the gun. So I've had it all these years. And also, as I grew up, I bought lots of shotguns over the years. Double barrel, over and under, side by sides, pump action. You know, I had all kinds of shotguns. But this one day when I was out hunting with my brother Jay Bird, I think I had my Charles Daly over and under 20-gauge shotgun. Great gun for squirreling or rabbit hunting. I couldn't pull the trigger. And, you know, I raised the gun, and I looked down the barrel, and I saw that squirrel. And, you know, it's weird. It came over me. I thought to myself, you know, I'd eaten squirrel plenty of times, and it's good. And I thought to myself, you know, it's Thanksgiving Day, and we're going to have a big feast. As soon as Jay and I leave here and go back home, we're going to have a multiple plate, loaded up, heaped up plates. My brother and I and my brother-in-law Barney, we always competed for who could eat the most heaping plates at Thanksgiving. And I'm not kidding you, we could go through 3 heaping plates and feel you know what afterwards. But I was looking down the barrel and I thought, what am I doing? I don't need the squirrel meat. I'm getting ready to have a feast. And not only that, but a few weeks later, we're going to have Christmas, and we're all going to be giving and receiving gifts. And I thought to myself, looking at that squirrel, because that squirrel was looking right at me, And he was close. And I looked at him and I thought, what does he have to look forward to today? He's not going to have a feast. He's not going to have turkey and dumplings and mashed potatoes and gravy and everything else. He's not going to have desserts all out the yin-yang. He's not going to have family and friends over rejoicing and having a good time. He's just trying to survive out here. And I thought, well, and then here comes Christmas. What's he going to be getting on Christmas Day? Nothing. And then it dawned on me, in fact, he only had one thing that he possessed, that squirrel. And that one thing is what I was getting ready to take from him, his life. All of that occurred to me as I looked down my barrel. Meanwhile, I hear Jay pop pop over there. But I looked and I thought, you know what? I lowered the gun and I said, I'm not going to shoot that squirrel. But I didn't give up, I just waited. More and more squirrel came around me. I had like 5 or 6 of them real close, just like that one. And I raised my gun a couple more times and looked at different squirrel, and I had the same feeling. I thought, I can't do it. I mean, if I needed the meat, I could have done it. But I'd killed so many animals growing up in hunting, and so many squirrels, and I didn't need them that day. And I looked at them and I said, I can't do it. So I never pulled the trigger that day. That's the first time I ever went hunting and had a chance to kill game and didn't do it. So near dark, you know, I meandered out to the railroad track, and there comes Jaybird. Jaybird had his gun over his shoulder or down by his side, and he had in his fingers, as my brother-in-law Barney taught us to do, which he did lots of times, he had a squirrel tail in each finger and was holding them like a group with his fingers. You know, he had like 5 or 6 squirrel that were dangling down by his other side, pinching the tails between his fingers. And we come out on a railroad track and he says to me, he had no idea how important that day was going to be to either one of us, and neither did I. But he just looked at me and casually said, what's up, didn't you see any squirrel? He said, look, I got 5 or 6, whatever it was. I said, yeah, I heard you popping off. I said, good, congratulations. He said, didn't you see anything? I didn't hear you shooting. I said, yeah, I saw plenty. I had 5 or 6 around me the whole time I was there. I probably could have got 10 squirrel, you know. He said, well, why didn't you get them? And I just looked at him and I said, it's over, Jay. I'm not doing it anymore. And I mean, I was dead serious. There was a look in my eye. I'm sure he saw it. And he was disturbed. I mean, it upset him. Because he looked back at me and he said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He was like, it was like a fear of his life type thing. Because he thought of me as his hunting buddy. You know, we were fishing buddies, hunting buddies. And whenever he was in the woods, I was in the woods. And he just couldn't imagine hunting without me, you know, going with him at the time. And I said, Jay, I'm just not doing it anymore. And I told him the same thing I told you. I said, what do these animals have compared to us? We're having a feast today, Jay. What are they having? We're going to be giving and receiving gifts in a few weeks at Christmas. What are they going to be getting? And I said, Jay, they only have one thing. Think about it. And that's the one thing we're here to take from them, their lives. And I said, if we need the meat, that's fine. But do we need it, Jay? I don't need it. I said, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. And boy, Jay Bird was heartbroken. He couldn't believe it. But I don't think he thought I meant it, you know. But he tried to encourage me to give it more thought and don't give up. Because he said, you're my hunting buddy, man. I need you, blah, blah, blah. Well, we went on, got back in the car, went home, had our feast, our typical 3 heaping plates, competing with our brother-in-law Barney. We had a good time. In a house full of noise and talk and just a great family time. But you know what? It's been 30 years to my estimation, and I've never hunted one time since. That was my last time. And I felt the same way about deer hunting and everything. It all came to me. Now, I don't judge people for hunting at all. I have no problem. My brother Jay Bird hunts all the time, just like he always did. Owns his own land. He's got 16 acres. and hunts his own deer and stuff on his own land. He's got people out there poaching his animals in his woods where they don't belong because it's private property. But he hunts, and I have lots of friends that hunt. You know, I don't judge anyone for hunting. I have no ill feelings whatsoever. It's just for me that I just realized you know, whenever we used to hunt and fish and keep the game, we would either eat it ourselves at family dinners, or we would give it to neighbors or other people that needed food. But at that particular time, 30 years ago, I couldn't think of anyone to give it to, and I didn't need it myself, and it led me to really just stop hunting. And Jaybird and I, we hunted archery, we hunted, you know, everything, shotgun, archery. We had a rifle season for squirrel here. We hunted that. We had muzzle loading. And my son and my brother Jaybird, they hunt everything to this day. In fact, I think my son's probably out hunting right now. So nothing against hunting. But for me, it was over, and that's my Thanksgiving story. We had a great Thanksgiving, but my last day of hunting happened on that day. Following that day, I sold all my guns, except this one, the one my mom bought me. God bless her soul, she passed on years ago. My very first gun, a 12-gauge Savage Stevens, original single shot. It's not valuable in terms of money, but to me, it's you know, I could never sell it. But anyway, that's my Thanksgiving story. And I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I'm sorry the video is so long, but you know me, when I get talking, there's no end to it. I hope everyone has a warm and happy and peaceful Thanksgiving with great times with your family and friends today. And that's what I'll be doing. Thanks for watching, everyone. God bless, and best wishes.